In today's lecture, we'll be learning about what a quadratic function is. Apa itu fungsi quadratic? Okay, on my right hand side, you see that there are different type of shapes of a graph. Okay, some shape like a U, but some shape like a N. Some is positioned on the left hand side. Some are positioned on the right hand side. Some are located at the very top part of the graph, but some are located at the bottom part of the graph. But why a graph shaped like so? Okay, and all this graph can be actually represented by using numbers. Okay, if you would not like to draw the graph, but you would like to represent this visual graph by using numbers, you can do so by using quadratic function. So what is quadratic function? Quadratic function is actually just numbers that represent on how a graph look like. Okay, so in our following lesson, okay, we will learn more in detail about what is a quadratic function and how the value of a, b, and c, okay, those are numbers that can impact on how the graph shape like. So for our very first learning objective, we will learn about what is a. A, B, C, all of these are actually numbers, but the value of A can be positive or negative. When the value of A is positive, okay, let's imagine on how the graph would shape like. Okay, there's actually a very simple trick of remembering this. When A is a positive number, okay, if you are in a situation where you have a positive mood, you for sure will become very happy, right? You will be very happy if you're being in a positive state. Okay, so if A is positive, you would smile, and there goes the shape of the graph. The graph, okay, the shape of the graph is also like a smiley face. And in the examination, you're required to describe how a graph shape like. You for sure cannot describe that the graph shape like a smiley face. Okay, in your examination, okay, those will be tested to describe how this graph shape like if a is a positive number. So if you like to describe how the graph shape like, okay, it is actually a parabolic shape. This is known as a parabolic shape. Okay, this is known as a parabolic shape, and it opens up. Why do you say that it opens up? Because you see the top part of it is exposed to the surrounding. So opens up, buka ke atas. And when it is a smiley face, okay, the bottom part of it, the bottom point of it is called as the minimum point. You have to know when A is positive, it is a smiley face, so there will be having a minimum point. In your examination, you are also required to determine the coordinate of the minimum point. But for now, we will just look at how the graph shape like if A is positive, which is a smiley face. Okay, and when the A is negative, okay, when A is negative, you being in a negative state, how would you feel? In terms of emotion, you will feel sad, you will feel very sad, right? So if A is negative, you will feel sad. Yes, and when you feel sad, the graph also shaped like a sad face. So the graph, when we draw it, okay, it is actually a sad face. And in the examination, if you would like to describe how the graph shape like, okay, you describe it as parabolic shape. Okay, this is known as a parabolic shape, but it opens down, buka ke bawah. Why it opens down? Because the bottom part of it is exposed to the surrounding. So it opens down. And when it opens down, the top tip part of it is called as the maximum point, titik maximum. And in the examination, you will also required to determine the maximum point. Yeah, all right. But for now, we will not look at it. Okay, we will just learn about what the graph shape like when A is negative. Now, let's get back to when A is positive. Okay, you have learned that when A is positive, alright, the graph will shape like a smiley face. For instance, if A is 2, it is a positive, so it's shaped like a smiley face. But what if I change the value of A, okay, to 5, to the value of 5? Okay, please do note that the value is still positive. But if the value of positive changes to a greater number, the graph will have a change in the shape. It becomes narrow and steeper. Okay, graph jadi lebih sempit dan curam. However, if you change the positive value of A to a lesser value, okay, like 1 over 2, it is still positive, but a lesser value. Alright, the graph will becomes wider and less steep. Graph menjadi lebih lebar dan kurang curam. Okay, and I want you, okay, to look at it and memorize the shape of the graph when the value of A is positive, but it changes the value from greater to less. Okay, this have to be memorized because in the examination you will be tested. Okay, and let's look at an exercise. Okay, so now you are required to explain the effect if the graph of fx equals to 9x squared plus 7x minus 2 is changed into 3x squared plus 7x minus 2. So terangkan kesan graph itu ya. Okay, when the value of A is 9 but changed to 3. Okay, 9 and 3 both are positive value. But when the positive value of A becomes lesser, what happened? When the positive value of A becomes lesser, like 1 over 2, the graph becomes wider and less steep. So this answer should be the same also. When 9 becomes 3, the value becomes lower, alright? The graph becomes wider and less steep. Graph menjadi lebih lebar dan kurang curam. This only applies if the value of A is positive. Yeah, this only applies if the value of A is positive. If it is not positive, we will have to look at the another situation of the graph. Now, if A is not positive, if A is less than 0, if A is negative, then the graph would shape like a sad face. For instance, if A is negative 2, the graph is a sad face. But what if the value of A becomes lesser? From negative 2 to negative 5, okay? The value decreases, then the graph becomes narrow and steeper. Graph menjadi lebih sempit dan curam. What if the value of A becomes greater? The value of A increases. Okay, for instance, A equals to negative 1 over 2. The graph will actually become wider and less steep. Graph menjadi lebih lebar dan kurang curam. So this situation is actually the opposite when A is positive. So when A is positive and A is negative and there is a change in the value of A, it is actually having a different situation on how it impacts on the shape of the graph. So these two are very different and you have to memorize the pattern of the graph. Now let's have a look at how the exercise will test you on. Alright, you are requested to explain the effect, okay, if the graph of fx equals to negative 1 over 3x squared plus 7x minus 2 is changed into negative 6x squared plus 7x minus 2. So from negative 1 over 3 to negative 6, okay, this two value of A is negative, okay, this two value of A is negative, but the value of A decreases. The negative value of A decreases. Okay, when A is negative, it is a sad face. But when the value of A decreases, the graph becomes narrow and steeper. Graph menjadi lebih sempit dan curam. So for this case, negative 1 over 3 to negative 6, the value of A, the negative value of A decreases. So graph menjadi lebih sempit dan curam. Graph becomes narrow and steeper. So you have to memorize. Okay, you have to memorize because in the examination, this will be tested both in your objective question and also structured question. Now, let's take a look at how the value of B will influence on how the graph shape like. You have already learned that value of A, when the value of A is positive, okay, the graph shape like a smiley face. But what if the value of B is also positive? When the value of B is positive, yeah, from B being 0, okay, if B being 0 is like this, but from B being 0 to a value that is greater than 0, to a value that is positive, it will actually, okay, you can see that the graph shifted downwards. First, it shifted downwards, then to the left. Okay, beralih secara condong ke bawah dan ke kiri. So remember, when A is positive and B is also positive, greater than 0, then it will shift downwards to the left. Alright? And then you still remember that when the A is a positive value, right, there is a minimum point. And now the minimum point of the graph is located on the left hand side of the y-axis, left hand side of the fx. So when you are about to describe it in your examination, you have to describe that the minimum point lie on the left side of the y-axis, the left side of the fx. Okay, titik minimum berada di sebelah kiri paksi y. This have to be remembered. Now, let's take a look at the exercise here. Alright, explain the effect if the graph of fx equals to 1 over 3x squared plus 7x minus 2 is changed into 1 over 3x squared plus 14x minus 2. So you see, the value of b, okay, the value of b increases, okay, and the condition is that 1 over 3, the a is positive. When the a is positive and the b is also positive but increases, okay, the positive value of b increases, then the graph shifted downwards to the left. Okay, beralih secara condong ke bawah dan ke kiri, and you have to describe for the minimum point as well. The minimum point lie on the left side of the y-axis, berada di sebelah kiri paksi y. This is how you should describe it. Okay, there are two sentences when describing the changes in the value of b of the graph. Alright, now what if the value of a is positive but the value of b become negative? When the value of b become negative, okay, let's take a look at how it will influence the shape. When the value of b becomes negative, it will move downwards, okay, but to the right hand side. Beralih secara condong ke bawah tapi ke kanan. Okay, no, so now it's not to the left, it's to the right, okay, downward to the right. And when it moves downward to the right, okay, the minimum point, okay, is actually on the right hand side of the y-axis. So the minimum point lie on the right side of the y-axis. Titik minimum berada di sebelah kanan paksi y. Okay, now let's do the exercise. Okay, explain the effect if the graph of fx 1 over 3x squared plus 7x minus 2 is changed into 1 over 3x squared minus 14x minus 2. Okay, so now okay, 1 over 3 and 1 over 3, which is the value of a. The value of a is positive, but the value of b becomes negative. So when it becomes negative, it will shift downwards to the right. Okay, ke bawah dan ke kanan, and the minimum point, titik minimum, is on the right side of the y-axis. Okay, sebelah kanan paksi y. So you describe it in this way lah. Okay, downward to the right, ke bawah dan ke kanan. Minimum point lies on the right side of the y-axis. Titik minimum di sebelah kanan paksi y. You have to memorize all this. Yes, you have to memorize. Now, what if the value of a now becomes negative? Okay, when the value of a is negative, not positive, when the value of a is negative, so it is a set phase. And then the value of b becomes positive. So when a is negative but b become positive, it will actually shifted upwards, up, not down. Now a is negative but b positive, up to the right. Ke atas dan ke kanan. This have to memorize, mesti hafal. Okay, and now we know that a set phase has the maximum point, right? Now the maximum lie on the right hand side, right side of the y-axis, sebelah kanan paksi y. You have to memorize all this. Okay, exam for sure will come out one in your objective, okay, or in your structured question. Not only modern maths, NMAX student will also be tested on this. So if you are an NMAX student also, you have to memorize this. Okay, all this will be tested in your examination. Now, explain the effect if the graph of fx negative 1 over 3x squared plus 7x minus 2 is changed into negative 1 over 3x squared plus 14x minus 2. So, a is negative value, okay, the a is negative value, but the positive value of b becomes greater. So if it is already positive but become more greater value of a positive value of b, it's still having the same changes, okay, shifted upward to the right, and then the maximum point of it, because this is a set phase, so it has a maximum point, the titik maximum berada di sebelah kanan on the right hand side of the y-axis, paksi y. Have to remember, hafal betul-betul, okay, before you sit for your examination. Okay, next, what if the value of a is negative and the value of b is also negative? So for this case, if both value also negative, then it will shift upward but to the left. Up, left. Okay, upward to the left. So beralih secara condong ke atas tapi ke kiri, bukan ke kanan, ke atas dan ke kiri. And because this value of A is negative, so it has a maximum point. But now the titik maximum lies on the left side of the y-axis. Di sebelah kiri paksi y. So you have to remember all this, okay? I know it's very traumatizing you, okay? But you have to memorize all this, okay? In the examination, you will be tested, and the weightage is 1 mark. Okay, normally it's just 1 mark lah. Okay, if you think that it's very hard for you, okay, you still have other subjects, okay, then skip it. Okay, just skip it because in the examination it's just 1 mark, 1 mark only. All right. Now, explain the effect if the graph of f(x), negative 1 over 3x squared plus 7x minus 2 is changed into negative 1 over 3x squared minus 14x minus 2. So the value of A is negative, and then the value of B also becoming negative. So when both are negative, it will actually shifted upward but to the left. Ke atas tapi ke kanan. Okay, sorry, ke atas dan ke kiri. Okay, why I wrote left in Malay also? Okay, ke atas dan ke kiri. Okay, ke atas dan ke kiri, not left. Alright, I forgot to edit that part. Alright, now, okay, so because the value of A is negative, it is a maximum point, okay, and it lies on the left side of the y-axis. Di sebelah kiri paksi y. Okay, now we look at the second part, okay, C. Now, the value of C is actually the coordinate, okay, or the intersection that the graph intersects on the y-axis. Okay, meaning to say that, okay, the value of C is actually the point, okay, the y coordinate of the graph, that intersects with the y-axis. For instance, if you're looking at this graph, right, okay, the graph of it, the blue line, is actually intersecting with fx. When it intersects with the fx, where it intersects? At the point 0. Yes, at the point 0. So C will be 0. Yeah, so the meaning of C is actually the y coordinate. The y coordinate of the graph that intersects on the y-axis. Yeah? Okay, now, what if the C, the value of C, which is positive, okay, becomes greater? Then the graph will shift upwards, because I already told you that the value of C is actually the intersection of the graph on the fx. So from intersecting at 0 of the fx to intersecting on the 1 of the fx, it will actually shifted upwards, because 0 to 1 is actually 1 shift upwards. Okay, so beralih ke atas. And for this case, it is A greater than 0, so the graph will still remain as a smiley face. But when you describe it, you do not have to describe that the parabolic shape opens up. No need. If you're requested to just describe on C, you just say that the graph shifted upwards. That will do. Okay, that will do. So you do not need to describe for the A when there's only changes on C. Okay, so one sentence is already enough. Now, explain the effect if the graph of fx equals to 1 over 3x squared plus 7x plus 2 is changed into 1 over 3x squared plus 14x plus 5. So the value of A is positive, but there's no much impact of A on it, because now the focus is on C. The value of C changes from positive 2 to positive 5. And I've already told you that the value of C is actually the point where the graph intersects on the y-axis. So from 2, from 2 on the y-axis to 5 on the y-axis, from 2 to 5, it actually shifted upwards. Okay, the graph shifted upwards, beralih ke atas. And you do not have to describe the shape of the A. When A is positive, you do not have to describe that the parabolic shape opens up. No need to describe. Just describe C will do. Okay, so it shifted upwards. Now, when the value of A is positive, so it is a smiley face, but the C becomes negative. Alright, so when it intersects it intersects at 0, so it lies on the 0, okay, the fx is 0. But when the c becomes negative, for instance negative y, for instance negative 1, so it will from 0 drop downwards, shifted downwards from 0 to negative 1, because the value of c is actually indicating the point where the graph intersects on the fx. So when 0 to negative 1, shifted downwards, beralih ke bawah. And you do not have to describe A, you only have to describe C. So explain the effect if, okay, there is no C, okay, you can see 1 over 3x squared plus 7x, there is no C. So if there is no C, we assume that C is 0. Okay, we assume that C is 0 because there is no C. So C is 0. And it changed to C is negative 2. So from 0 to negative 2, 0 to negative 2, the graph will shifted downwards. Okay, the graph shifted downwards, beralih ke bawah, 0 to negative 2. Yeah, okay, because C is actually the point where the graph intersects on the y-axis, on the fx. Now, okay, you are requested, okay, to describe the value of C, okay, when A is negative but C becoming positive. Alright, when A is negative, it is just a sad face, not smiley face, okay, this should be a sad face, okay, this should be a sad face, so this is an error, this should be a sad face. And C is positive, and C is being positive. Okay, if C is being positive, that means from 0 to positive, it will shifted upwards. Graph beralih ke atas is shifted upwards because the value of C is actually just indicating where the graph intersects on the y-axis. So from 0 to 1, from 0 to 1, okay, and you do not have to describe for the value of A, okay, you do not have to describe for the value of A. If there are no changes, you do not have to describe for the value of A. Okay, now you see. Explain the effect if the graph of fx negative 1 over 3x squared plus 7x is changed into negative 1 over 3x squared plus 14x plus 3. So if A having no changes, it is still negative, negative, you do not have to describe. Okay, you do not have to describe A because there are no changes. If there is changes from negative value of A to positive value of A, you have to describe. But for now, there are no changes, so no need to describe for A. You just have to describe for C. Just have to describe for C. So now you see C is 0 because 7x behind it doesn't have the value of C, so it is 0. From 0 to positive 3, okay, from 0 to positive 3 is shifted upwards. Is shifted upwards. Okay, so the graph shifted upwards. Graph beralih ke atas because the C is actually indicating the value of y where the graph intersecting on the y-axis. Okay, now when A is negative, so the graph will shape like a sad face, alright? And C is also negative. So from 0 to negative, for sure the graph will shifted downwards, right? Yes. So the graph shifted downwards. Graph beralih ke bawah. Okay. Now let's look at an example question here. Explain the effect if the graph of fx equals to negative 1 over 3 x squared plus 7x is changed into negative 1 over 3 x squared plus 14x minus 2. So the value of A is negative. And since both value of A is negative, you do not have to describe, okay? And then you look at the C. At the very beginning, the C is 0, but now at last the C becoming negative 2. So from 0 to negative 2, it will shift downwards. The graph shifted downwards. Graph beralih ke bawah. Okay, and that's all you have to know about value of A, value of B, and value of C, and how it will influence and change the shape of the graph. You have to memorize all this, okay? You have to memorize all this. And that's all for this lesson, okay? And see you in the following lesson, okay? Following part of the lecture.